India has so many more things to give to the world.
I think the most important lesson is the importance of connecting with other people as human beings. Future generations of diplomats must always retain their individuality and their individual attributes. For every diplomat, it's important to be up to date and aware of the framework. The biggest challenge to any diplomat is to be out of touch with the realities of your own country. Technology can be used to conduct negotiations, but education means also to keep your mind open to new ideas and new developments.
Very interesting, because you're saying that the national agenda or the framework that we are using to present India to the world, that should trickle down all the way higher education, school education, primary education.
Which Westerners come to India and learn and take back to their own societies.
Namaste, Ambassador Mukerji. Welcome back to Rishihood. You've seen our long journey. We have been interacting for a very long time. And you are on a very important day on campus. That is the International Day of Yoga. Exactly 10 years back was what the UN recognized as the International Day of Yoga. And you played a very key role at the UN when that happened. So as the questions are coming up in the auditorium today as well, right? That India has so many more things to give to the world as in terms of soft power. Yoga was just one of them. So this whole negotiation exercise that underwent and recognized yoga, what are the lessons that you think future diplomats and future civil servants of this country have to pick up from this exercise and continue on the unfinished agenda that we have, as we discussed? What can they do? What can they learn from this?
Well, I think the most important lesson that can be taken away from the Yoga Day resolution and its negotiation is the importance of connecting with other people as human beings. That, in a sense, helped to create a receptive partner for any ideas that we have to give. And I gave the example of the link between the old civilization and culture of China and India, and how we brought the two of them together to jointly co-sponsor this initiative. But it goes to not only societies, but also to individuals. And I think that future generations of diplomats must always retain their individuality and their individual attributes. They can be technocrats, they can be social scientists, they can be doctors, and each of these attributes should not be lost sight of when they pursue diplomacy. Because many doors open because of these skills that people possess. So it's my hope that we don't have a situation where everything is sought to be made uniform, because that would become ideological. Mm-hmm. And that in the Yoga Day resolutions, we saw countries which did not encourage their diplomats to respond through individual initiatives, but to seek instructions. Okay. That slows down the interaction. It also creates issues which may not be there between the two individuals, but which are there between the differences in the systems. And the classic example was the Swiss example of why they were not able to become co-sponsors. So that's linked with the way they take decisions within Switzerland. They have a system of referendums and so on, which were not part of the discussions or the interaction during the Yoga Day negotiation. So that's important. Then, of course, an awareness of the framework in which the interaction takes place. I think for every diplomat, it's important to be up to date and aware of the framework. Yeah. Because the frameworks change from the time you begin your professional journey to the time you reach the point of the negotiation. And the framework changes within the country you're representing. The framework changes in the country of the partner with whom you are negotiating, or the partners you're negotiating with. And of course, there's a broader international framework which also plays a role. So I think that in our case, it was very timely for us to bring the new framework, which was encapsulated in 2014 in Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Mm-hmm. So that was the framework in which we negotiated the outcome of the Sustainable Development Goals. we were able to ensure that at least the major sustainable development goals reflected the development priorities of India, and this was acknowledged by the Prime Minister himself. So what we did on the ground by agreeing to the targets, to the goals, actually had an impact on our own framework of transforming India. And I think that that's an awareness that comes not only through experience, but also through awareness of knowledge, of keeping in touch with what is happening. The biggest challenge to any diplomat is to be out of touch with the realities of your own country.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that played a role in the outcome that we got, because it's not only during that period of 2015, 2016, 2017, but as the international system started to get fractured from 2017 onwards, in the context of China versus its United States, etc., the focus was already going down on implementing the sustainable goals. The amount of resources available to implement the goals from multilateral financial institutions was becoming less, because the major players, especially the United States, was withdrawing from multilateralism and going into this Make America Great Again vision. And that posed a challenge for others to make up those resources and to find new ways. And I think that each country and a diplomat plays a role in advising the country on leadership of the country on what are the options. I think that's what political leadership also expects from the diplomat. Then, for example, when we had this problem of meeting the goals of the energy SDG, then the process to galvanize the movement towards renewable and solar power gathered momentum, and it gave a result in the International Solar Alliance in 2018. And the fact that India today hosts the 20 years in International Solar Alliance is an example of how a diplomat can give an idea, but the idea, when it's implemented, will have an impact not only on the nation, but also on all the 120 countries which are members of this initiative. And that adds an Indian dimension to the global agenda. Something that for a long time probably we did not specify. But now we are more and more specific about using our own experience to influence and set the global agenda. And similarly, with an inbuilt issue during these negotiations on development was the use of technology for development. So that generated its momentum and very ironically got a boost from the pandemic, which put a focus on how technology can be used to conduct negotiations, diplomatic interactions, and also have outcomes. So at the end of it, when India hosted the G20, we were able to offer our experience of global public infrastructure as a global digital public infrastructure as a global framework, and that was accepted in the New Delhi summit of the G20. So it's in different areas, but I think a diplomat, therefore, while having his or her own specialization and skills before becoming a diplomat, should have the ability to absorb a wider venue, and that's where education becomes very important. And education is in the sense of not only learning set topics in set manners, but education means also to keep your mind open to new ideas and new developments. The world we are living in is now becoming more and more unpredictable. And therefore, the diplomat is facing a bigger challenge and has to have an awareness of the kinds of impact this will bring forward. So that's what I would think.
So you mentioned, of course, that you got a lot of support from the Prime Minister, the freedom that you were given in the negotiations. And the Prime Minister gets the support or the political will from the people. And the people themselves want this to happen. And that's what builds confidence when we negotiate on the international arena. So I see educational institutions like we are mentioning playing a very important role in building the public awareness about these issues as well. So at Rishihood, we have in the foundation year, right in the first semester, a course on understanding India that gives them an awareness of the civilizational heritage. Understanding self and society. That's where yoga, other dimensions come in. And also global grand challenges, something on SDGs that you mentioned, right? So what are the challenges? So this awareness coming into the younger population right through their education, that helps build the whole country's awareness, and that empowers the political authorities as well as our diplomats when they talk on behalf of the country at a global stage. So, and today with your help, we have also launched the yoga and wellness minor at Rishihood, right? So that is what we're trying to do. So any thoughts on how education can help further our diplomatic agenda? Because not everybody might be negotiators and become diplomats, right? But the public support is very important. So how can education play a role in that?
I think that today we are better positioned than we were earlier, because today there is an identified framework for the transformation of India. And that framework, the Prime Minister himself has said, is Agenda 2030 on sustainable development. It has 16 goals, 17th is partnerships. So if we in our educational system were to focus on developing awareness and skills and interest in each of these goals, I think that should actually become then easier to integrate into the curriculum. And if at the end of the school process, I'm talking here of primary and secondary schools, at the end of the school process, the examinations that take place have this framework, then the whole point of making people educated to be employable and productive and contribute to the social and national good will be easier to achieve. If we follow different educational curricula, if we have different partners from abroad who have their own curricula, then we will only aggravate disintegration and fracturing. We need a little more cohesiveness without taking away from the diversity of the goals and the plurality of our society. That is obviously not the intention. But the intention is to provide a framework for education. And one area that I think is very, very important is the digital transformation of India. We have to, for example, I teach courses on cyber security, and I find it a gap that we don't have an awareness of cyber security until the person gets employed. By that time, it's too late to inculcate the instinctive awareness of cybersecurity issues, which are well known from the very beginning. And today, when children are able to use smartphones at very young ages, it should be possible to also teach them cyber hygiene, for example, which is the building block for cybersecurity. That will help all of us to avoid spending large amounts of resources on training people who are already beyond the receptive stage. They're already set in their ways. So to make those people aware of cybersecurity, I find is very difficult. Whereas if you catch them at a younger stage, then it is easier, and that will contribute.
Very interesting, because you're saying that the national agenda or the framework that we are using to present India to the world, that should trickle down all the way, higher education, school education, primary education. That's when all of us will think as a country in the same direction. That's a very fascinating way to look at it, because in the fragmentation that we have, everybody is doing their whole own thing, and we are not able to build a coherent voice at the global stage. And if we have to be a global leader, everybody has to think in the same direction. So that's a very interesting input. So we would also want to use, we have our frameworks which are broadly aligned, but taking a cue from what you are saying, what are the global happenings, what does India stand on them, and building our curriculum back from that would be something that would build the right mindset.
And also using India's own ground reality into this.
Yes.
So that we can also contribute
Yes.
to the way, for example, we secure cyberspace. There are Indian ways of doing, which Westerners come to India and learn and take back to their own societies. I had this many years ago now with British Telecom when they came to India, and they had an Indian CEO. And he came back to London 1 year later and said that British Telecom came to India with one business model but they went back from India with an Indian business model which they applied to other countries.
Okay.
So this shows that India is also a huge laboratory or school or university, call it what you will. But we have a lot of experience, data and ideas, which outsiders can come and see and exploit, but we ourselves are, and of course Silicon Valley is the best example of what I'm trying to say, that why should we not be able to do all that in India now that we have the financial depth as the 5th largest economy in the world. We have the money. Earlier perhaps the question was we didn't have the money, but the technology should actually be grown in India, for India and shared with the world.
Yeah. So Indian solutions to Indian problems, which are scalable broader across the world.
That's right.
Particularly the global south that India represents, right? About 3/4 of the world population is there.
That's right.
So thank you,
Thank you.
Ambassador Mukerji, for sharing your thoughts. It was a great conversation and hope we can have more such conversations, because at Rishihood we are looking at creating the right graduates who have this global outlook yet being rooted in the Indian reality. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Shobit. That was very nice.